University. Additional funding is provided by the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Association and the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, presenting TarHeelGardening.com, your online gardening resource for North Carolina plants, professional advice, and more. And by Appalachian Naturescapes, custom landscape designs specializing in Blue Ridge native landscape themes, from intimate gardens to elaborate outdoor living spaces. AppalachianNaturescapes.com. Also by the North Carolina Sod Producers Association, representing sod growers throughout the state who produce quality turf grasses to meet a variety of residential, commercial, and recreational turf grass needs. ncsod.org.
Coming up, vertical gardening, accessible gardening, and other gardening trends for all growing seasons. Next. Hi, welcome to In the Garden. I'm Bryce Lane. As with many other things in life, gardening trends come and go. On today's show, we'll look at a few popular trends for the home garden. Then, we'll revisit a few planting projects in my own home landscape. It only takes a few weeks to see some major growth in the garden, and that progress can unleash budding creativity and inspire planning for the next season. If you've gardened in the same location for as long as I have, 30 years, you will often be faced with choices about removing plants that have overgrown their area. Now take for instance this Cercis canadensis traveler. This is a traveler redbud, and I had it planted along the rock wall. It's a weeping plant and it mounds and weeps, and it was doing great flowing over the rocks. But what happened is it got bigger and bigger and started to encroach more and more on this path. Well, on the other side, by the sunroom, I have a Chamaecyparis, a Hinoki false cypress, and it's gotten larger too. So slowly but surely, those two plants got closer and closer to where the path became somewhat restricted to walk through. Now, one of the solutions would be to remove this beautiful redbud, but I chose to do something a little bit different, and this is a great little project that I've been working on. Now, because Traveler Redbud is a weeping plant, I'm going to train it to try to create an arch or a portal for this walkway and have it grow up and over to create that unique presentation. Now, to do that, I'm going to need to train these branches. So early this spring, what I did was I put in 3 stakes that go up pretty high, and I trained some of the branches before they leafed out on those stakes to create this vertical element. Now I used zip ties to attach the branches, and then I got that spring flush of growth. You can see now there's a second chapter needed. These branches are now growing down from this higher level. I need for these branches to grow up and across. And so now I've got to create a structure to train these branches across to create that archway. So that's the next step. Now, how am I going to do that? Well, thankfully, I've got the side of my house to work with, and I'm going to use little tiny screw eyes and screw them into the fascia board of the house and run wire across. It's the perfect height. Then I'll take these branches, and with those same zip ties, I'll train those branches to grow across. Now, we'll follow this all summer long and see the progression. The ultimate goal will be to create that archway and not have to remove the redbud or the Hinoki false cypress, but create an inviting portal from one area of my garden to the other. Now it's just a matter of stringing up the wire and training the plants. It's time to check up on that Cercis canadensis traveler redbud arch that I started about 6 weeks ago. And you remember I put the wires trying to create an archway in this area of my garden because it was coming across and blocking this. And if you look up, you can see that I've gotten quite a bit of growth out of each and every one of those stems. If you look closely at the stems, they were green when I first started to train them. Now they've lignified, and that's a term we use to describe how they've gotten real woody and gotten swollen. That means they're starting to hold their shape. Now, I'm going to keep the wires up here for a couple of years to let this get bigger and literally be able to hold itself up. When I go to garden centers and botanical gardens and we look at plants and feature plants on the show, I get excited about those plants and I try to find them, bring them home and use them in my own garden. And you know, you should try to do the same thing. If you see a plant you're excited about that we talk about on the show, find out where you can get it, bring it home and try it. Now I've acquired two. Check this one out. This is Penicillium Jade Princess. Now we featured this at the University of Georgia Trial Gardens last year and I was so struck by it, I've managed to find 3 plants, and I've got 3 plants, one planted in this container. You recall that has these chartreuse colored leaves and it's a millet and it'll have a burgundy flower head. Well, I've planted it in amongst this annual called Torinia, and this one is a blue cultivar. So we'll watch and see how this goes. I also planted one of the Jade Princess in my landscape and in another ceramic container out in the garden. So we'll follow this one and see how it grows here in North Carolina. Now the other one is Hibiscus sabdariffa, and this plant we saw at Fairview Garden Center growing in a container, talking with Brad Rollins about it. You remember those unique and interesting flowers and seed pods. Well, I collected seeds, saved them during the winter, and then I planted them just recently in this container and out in my garden. It only took 3 days for these to germinate, and I've got a great stand of this plant. Remember, the common name was called Roselle. Very unique hibiscus with a pink fruiting body that you can actually eat in salads. Well, I'm excited to see how this is going to grow. I've got a lot of seedlings, and you might wonder, well, are you going to just leave them in the pot? I am, but I'll thin many of those seedlings out, maybe leave 3 or 4 plants to grow, and we'll watch and see how it grows here and in my landscape. What a difference 8 weeks can make. You remember I had that Hibiscus sabdariffa on the patio in that large container, and they were just little seedlings. Look at them now. They're huge, a good 3.5 feet. But there's the container still. It got so big I couldn't keep it on the patio. So I moved it out into an empty spot in the garden. And that's a really great tip for gardening. If you've got containers that are getting big and you've got spaces in your garden where you need a plant, you don't always have to plant them in the ground. You can actually move that container out into the landscape. But remember, it still is going to need to be watered. And if we don't get enough rain, you'll have to add supplementary water to those containers. But here it is, growing large and in charge right here in this spot. It's filled this spot, and I'm excited about the flower buds. They're starting to form. Remember, the flowers on this hibiscus, small, understated, but there are a wonderful color, kind of a pinkish color, and that contrasts the nice red stem. Now you remember the Penicillium Jade Princess. I had it in a container, but I also planted one in the landscape. Look right over here. You can see those beautiful burgundy colored plumes. The inflorescence, the flowers have come out just as predicted. Now the leaves aren't as yellow anymore. They're more green. But this one right near the bird bath makes a great statement. Look over here on the patio and you can see the one growing in the patio. I've already had to deadhead the plumes. Now there's a good tip on the Jade Princess Penicillium. When the plumes get large, they go from burgundy to a brown color and they look a little bit old and used up. Go back in with your pruners, prune them out, deadhead them, and that'll stimulate more growth from the inside. And so you can see here with the Torinia, that beautiful blue flowered annual around the outside, you can see how by deadheading I'm getting new plumes on that plant. Over here in this burgundy colored ceramic pot, I've already deadheaded once and I've got new plumes coming. The Jade Princess Penicillium has been a great summer performer for me and one I intend to use in my garden from here on forth. Well, here is an easy little garden project that you can do on the railing of your front porch or a deck. I planted a small annual vine called Black-Eyed Susan vine. This is Thunbergia, and the cultivar is Arizona Dark Red. So the little flowers are a more reddish color. The actual species is a yellow flower, but it's a vine, and I trained it out of the container up the railing post and then across the top of the railing. I put little eye hooks in with wire across and trained that vine on it. Now that was about 6 to 8 weeks ago. Look how much growth has occurred. This is such a fast growing vine. It puts on inches a day, and it sporadically flowers all summer long until the first frost in the fall. And what a beautiful little red flower. But you can see how vigorous it is. It's draped over one side of the railing, over this side of the railing. It's even moved over into this container. You see how this one flower here complements the coleus that's growing there. It's easy vine to grow, full sun to partial sun. Keep that container well watered. Fertilize it every 3 to 4 weeks, not a big problem. The only other thing you need to do to make it look a little bit better is to pull off some of the leaves that have been damaged and deadhead. And as far as deadheading is concerned, these little seed pods are left. Come in with your thumb and forefinger, pull them off, toss them over the side, and you're ready to go. This will be doing this all summer long, well into the fall. The genus Eucomis, or the pineapple lilies, are a great herbaceous perennial plant for the home garden. Now they come from a bulb and they spread with lots of beautiful foliage and a wonderful late spring flower spike. And then those flowers develop fruits. But by the middle of the summer, it develops kind of a messy appearance. Leaves flop over, and you can see that the flower stalks and the fruit get heavy. Oftentimes they're broken or they fall over to the side, and it can look real messy. Well, here's a great summer follow-up, a way to clean up the Eucomis and also enjoy the beautiful foliage by the end of the summer. Just need a pair of pruners and be brave to cut it way back. But it's about cutting it back. The first thing you can do is cut these fruit stalks back. Now, sometimes these can actually be brought inside, placed in a vase, and you can even enjoy them as the fruit develops. But not necessary. You can just dispose of them properly. So I'm cutting those fruit stalks back. You can see here on the Eucomis. Now, there are often growing centers down inside the Eucomis, and the leaves get broken and flopped back. Don't be afraid. Take your pruners and cut the leaves back. I like to take these very succulent leaves and put them in my compost pile because they add some good nitrogen to that compost pile. But it's a bold move. Don't be afraid. You can cut those leaves back in total all the way around the growing centers, because if you look carefully, as I cut the remaining leaves, you'll see, and this is what's so exciting, look right down in there. You can see a new sprout coming, a new growing center coming. The leaves have a little bit more of a purple tinge because that's this cultivar that has a little bit more purple. And there you have it. So what will happen is these growing centers will grow out. You'll have a nice, beautiful fall display of foliage. The bulbs will increase in size, and next spring, it'll do it all over again. This is a nice, tidy little summer garden maintenance that improves the surroundings of your home garden. When it comes to new gardening trends, here's one that we can all try: the living wall, a vertical garden. Now, some of the advantages of vertical gardening or green wall gardening are that we can garden in small spaces, decks and patios where we don't have soil. We can create a lovely garden vertically. In addition, it mitigates water, it reflects that light and absorbs the energy which would cool a house or a structure. It also allows us to garden standing up so we don't have to bend or stoop. Now, what kinds of plants might go in a living wall? Well, really anything goes. We can use herbs, vegetables, ornamental plants, annuals, even herbaceous perennials. Check out this wonderful patchwork wall of heucheras with the chartreuse and the burgundy all together. Now you might wonder, how might you do this? There are lots of different ways to do this. In this case, this living wall is using lobster trap material. It's a wired cage type material, and they create little cubes. They line it in landscape fabric, fill it with soil, plant the plants, and then slide them in to this structure. It's a very unique and interesting way to do that. You could find the same kind of material at your own hardware store and create the same types of things. Now, I know many of you are saying, well, you know, I'm not very handy and I'm not sure exactly how this would work. We'd water it from the top and let it drip down. But you might be thinking, I can't really do something where I build something. Well, we can go out and find found material, and I'll show you what that is, make a very small and well-presented living wall right in your own home. Who would have thought that a simple oak wood pallet would make a great vertical garden for the home? But it does. I went down to my local hardware store to see if I could purchase a pallet, but they just gave me one. I'm really thankful for that. And take a look. This beautiful gray weathered look is going to make a great vertical garden. Now let me show you how to put it together. Start by laying the pallet flat on the ground or on a table, backside up. You might want to assemble your vertical garden close to where it will be displayed. They can be quite heavy when completed. Next, wrap the back, sides, and bottom of the pallet with 2 layers of landscape fabric to contain the potting media. Landscape fabric is readily available at your local hardware store or garden center. A staple gun is an ideal tool to fasten the fabric to the pallet. The fabric is porous and allows for good water drainage. Be sure to secure the fabric using plenty of staples. Now it's time to fill the pallet spaces with potting media. Be sure to use a reputable pasteurized potting media. I recommend using any type that is moisture control and has slow release fertilizer added. That way you won't have to water as frequently, and it provides a source of nutrition for up to 3 months. Now it's time to plant. I have chosen violas for my winter garden. Winter hardy violas have a multitude of small, colorful flowers. I've chosen a wide array of flower colors to give a patchwork quilt effect. Push each plug in between the slats into the media. I have planted the plants about 3 to 4 inches apart. The last plant, all planted and ready to go, and look at this, a beautiful patchwork of violas. Now before I water it, I need to put it in the location it's going to be, because this has gotten very heavy, and if you add water you probably couldn't even move it. Now I've just got to decide where it should go. You know what? I think I'll place it under the kitchen window in the front of my house for everyone to see when they arrive. Southern location, and these violas will grow just beautifully. Now water your new garden. You should water it 3 times within the first hour to attain full saturation. You will have some media wash out when you water, but no worries. As the roots establish, less and less soil will be lost. Have a small bucket of media handy to replenish areas that lose a lot of soil. The only thing left to do now is to enjoy your new vertical garden. As gardens attract more and more visitors with varying abilities and mobility, it's becoming increasingly important to develop garden areas that provide opportunities for everyone to get involved and get their hands dirty. So Irene, this is really an incredible garden. How's it set up and how do you use it?
This is intended to be an accessible and interactive garden that relates to the taste, the sense of taste.
Okay.
It's immersed in the Garden of the 5 Senses at the Botanical Gardens, and we really want this to be an interactive garden where tasting is not just an aspect of it, but working in the garden. So wheelchair accessibility is a key point in this garden, as well as the ability to not have to bend over so much and maintain physical stature and strength without straining the body.
I also see, this is the first garden where I've ever actually seen railings along the walls.
Yes.
And that's just, it's so simple an idea, but it must be really effective.
For what I use the railing is the ability to just guide oneself independently. If they were normally using a walker, they can get rid of the walker and feel a little bit more free and empowered by guiding themselves throughout the garden. The other aspect is that I use it for an visual impaired person, so that along the railing there are textures underneath, and each time a new crop begins, I have a marker under the railing that will remind them to reach out and feel what that crop is.
Okay, so it gets them closer to the plants,
Exactly.
which is neat.
Exactly.
Well, tell us how you use the garden. I mean, you obviously have groups that come in and you work with them
Yes.
here. Yeah.
So we run a program called Therapeutic Horticulture, and it currently runs 3 days a week, and we have them through 6-week sessions and 12-week sessions. And the groups vary from all abilities, people from assisted living facilities to adult day programs. And then also we want to reach out to young people as well if possible. Currently we serve mostly adults. And they come here for their sessions that run an hour and a half. And we have a wonderful shade pavilion in the back here that allows for cooler conditions on a hot day like it may turn into today at noon.
So not only do they actually work in these beds, but they actually have activities where in that pavilion area they
Right.
can
So
they
the
can work.
activities are based off of what we have going on and growing in the gardens. And when, in the beginning of the season, when there's not really a lot of things to harvest quite yet, we become a little more creative. We harvest even just herbs and do a flower arranging. We dry the herbs during the later part of the season. We make lavender sachets. Later on in the season, we make a scratch and sniff scarecrow.
Oh, wow.
And so that gets really exciting for everybody.
Okay. Well, the last question I want to ask you is I see you've got some orange flags plugged into different places.
Yes.
What's going on there?
The orange flags are to correspond a plant which I've selected for them under the pavilion where they always start the day at. And there's an orange flag for especially somebody who is visually impaired but can capture a very strong color like red. Sure. That orange color in this case will connect to their visual ability a lot faster than a green colored flag. And so then they correspond that plant to where that flag is placed. The other idea is that it's a good visual reminder for people who have short-term memory loss.
Wow. Well, listen, thank you so much for, just scratching the surface relative to how you use this garden to help all of us with all abilities when it comes to horticulture.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming.
Our Plant of the Week is a great fall flowering annual. Send your suggestions in for a Plant of the Week to our website or our Facebook page, and if we use it on the air, we'll send you an In the Garden t-shirt. Now this is a fall flowering annual called Salvia Dancing Flames, the Dancing Flame Salvia, and it's a beautiful, beautiful annual that grows very well in North Carolina. This is just one plant that grew about 2.5 to 3 feet tall and equally as wide in one growing season. And if you look carefully at the leaves, you can see that they're variegated, yellow and green. And that's right along with the latest trend in gardening of using a lot of yellow or chartreuse colored leafed plants in the landscape. Now that's been around for quite some time, but it seems to be a real growing trend, that foliage color. What's great about this plant is I've planted it next to a variegated Duranta and near the Roselle, so all three together really make a great combination. This plant requires full sun, well-drained soil. Give it some fertilizer, either organic or a liquid fertilizer from time to time, and that'll help it grow. And then in the fall, late August, early September, it'll start to produce more and more of these red spikes of flowers. Now these spikes of flowers attract all kinds of insects and especially hummingbirds. I really like to use this plant in my garden because when the hummingbirds are preparing to migrate, they really need to fuel up on plants high in nectar, and this plant is one of their favorites. It's a great plant for a mixed border annual bed or as an accent plant in the landscape. It's a great Plant of the Week, not a lot of pest problems, and really easy to grow. Salvia Dancing Flames, the Dancing Flame Salvia. That's all the time we have for this week, so until next time, I'll be looking for you in the garden.
To register for In the Garden, the course, call NC State's Distance Education Program at 1-866-GO-STATE. That's 1-866-467-8283. or log on to distance.ncsu.edu. For more information about the program or to suggest a plant of the week, go to unctv.org/inthegarden.
Funding for In the Garden is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNCTV, and by North Carolina State University. Additional funding is provided by the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Association and the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, presenting TarHeelGardening.com, your online gardening resource for North Carolina plants, professional advice, and more. And by Appalachian Naturescapes, custom landscape designs specializing in Blue Ridge native landscape themes, from intimate gardens to elaborate outdoor living spaces. AppalachianNaturescapes.com. Also by the North Carolina Sod Producers Association, representing sod growers throughout the state who produce quality turf grasses to meet a variety of residential, commercial, and recreational turf grass needs. ncsod.org.